sensory processing. We've been asked to record this webinar so people who can't make it can attend or watch it. So if you turn your cameras off, you won't be seen at all on the recording. But once we start the presentation and the slideshow, your image won't be seen on the recording unless you start talking. And there'll be a bit of a discussion towards the end. So I'm going to hand it over to Jenny and Nabiha. So I'll start by sharing the screen for the slides, and you girls just let me know how you want me to progress.
Thanks, Kate.
I should be able to keep admitting people once we share the slides.
Okay.
Share the screen. Oh. Slideshow from beginning. All right, is that working for you?
Yes. Does everyone see that? Yep. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nabiha, and as Kate mentioned, Jenny and I were both occupational therapy students at the University of Sydney. And today we're going to be doing a sensory processing disorders in F&D workshop. So the workshop is, as much as it will be informational, it will also be interactive. So we have done a little bit of research and looked into some things that we can share with you today, but we also want to talk a little bit about the experiences that you guys have been going through and what sort of strategies that you guys have been using with F&D, because it is something that's new to a lot of us. Like, for example, for myself, I hadn't heard a lot about F&D before I came onto this placement. So it would be great to get some insight about what sort of strategies you guys are using in terms of regulating sensory issues within F&D. So to get started, next slide, please, Kate. Just a little bit on sensory processing and what it is. So sensory processing is the way a person perceives, organizes, and processes the information that they receive through their senses. By senses, I mean hearing, sight, touch, smell, taste, and 3 additional sensory systems that most people are not actually aware of, which are the vestibular sense, which is a part of the ear and the brain that is responsible for balance and eye movements, the proprioceptive sense, which is the body's ability to perceive its own position in space. The proprioceptive sense allows me to do this. And the interoceptive sense, which allows us to detect what is going on inside our body. It means our body can tell us when we're feeling hungry or when we're feeling cold or when we're in pain. So going into the next slide, sensory processing disorder. So having a sensory processing disorder, sorry, next slide.
It's not
going.
No, it's
frozen.
Enter. Oh dear, it's not going down. It's not going to the next slide. I'll try the mouse.
Zoom technical difficulties. Yeah, awesome. Okay. So sensory processing, a disorder in sensory processing affects how the brain processes sensory stimuli. Difficulties in processing can affect one, multiple, or all of our senses. And it is quite common in people with neurological disorders such as F&D and such as autism and ADHD. It can cause one to be hypersensitive to sensory input, undersensitive to sensory input, or seek out enormous amounts of input. And it can also cause motor and postural impairments and difficulties with making sense with the sensations that one feels. Sensory processing difficulties can also affect one's physical and mental health, as well as their behavior. Ultimately, it can trigger meltdowns, overload, and even burnouts. So the next slide is going a little bit into the theory behind sensory processing. It may be a little bit difficult to understand at first because it is a bit of theory, but I'll try my best to explain it. And hopefully I've got another slide with a video explanation, and I'll be giving some examples later on that will hopefully help with the explanation. So this 4-quadrant model is Winnie Dunn's model of sensory processing. The model focuses basically on the impact of sensory processing in our daily life. The model proposes a relationship between one's sensory threshold to their behavioral response, be it an active response where one controls the amount of sensory input received, or a passive response in which one makes no attempt to modulate their sensory stimuli. When one is oversensitive to sensory input, they will have low neurological threshold. This means that they will notice and respond to the stimuli easily. This means they will either fall into the quadrants of sensory avoiding or sensory sensitive quadrants, which is the bottom 2 quadrants. Sensory avoiding looks like little Piglet over there, who attempts to avoid sensory input and gets quite overwhelmed when exposed to sensory stimuli. Pooh, on the other hand, is sensory sensitive. He doesn't avoid the sensory input, however, is not comfortable with it either. Undersensitivity to sensory input requires a higher neurological threshold in which stronger stimuli is needed to activate a response. One can thus fall into the top 2 quadrants, which are either sensory seeking or low registration. Tigger is the perfect example of sensory seeking, who actively seeks sensory input to fulfill his crave for stimulation. Eeyore, on the other hand, shows low registration, someone who is less engaged and doesn't really know what happens around them. So I've got a video here in the next slide that has a brief explanation of Winnie Dunn's model, which is not, oh yeah. If you could just play that for us, please, Kate.
Is that working?
I don't think so. This is not working. Do you want me to play it from my screen, Kate? Well, I think you're on mute.
Depends on how you've got it embedded into the presentation.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Kate's got it there. Sorry, Kate. I don't think we can hear you. I think you're on mute.
Is that working?
Yeah, we can see it here now.
You can see and hear it?
Yeah. I don't know if you've played it yet. Is it played?
Yeah, it is.
Can everybody hear that? It's a bit low, I think.
Yeah, the sound was fairly low.
Okay. If it doesn't work at the moment, that's fine. Kate did say that she would be sharing the slides with everybody, so we can share the link for the model, the video, and they can, if you guys want to have a look at it, you can reference. We can put that in the reference as well. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Okay. Okay, so we're back on the slides?
Yeah, so we'll go to the next slide.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so studies specific to sensory processing in F&D is quite limited. There are specifically only 2 published articles on sensory processing in F&D. The figure I have above here is from one of the articles by Ranford's research, in which a study was conducted investigating sensory processing patterns with FND. As shown here, most patients with FND reported elevated scores in the quadrants of low registration, sensory sensitivity, and sensory avoiding. So what exactly do these impacts look like on our senses? So within the next slide, I've got examples of what the examples of sensory sensitivity, low registration, sensory seeking, and sensory avoiding looks like in each of our senses. So if you could go to the next slide, Kate. The table has examples for each senses, but I'll just be focusing on sensory sensitivity and sensory avoiding. And if you guys get a chance, you can have a look at the other ones as well and see if any of them relate to you. So in terms of someone who is sensory sensitive, with their hearing, they would be easily distressed and startled by loud noises, agitated by frequencies and pitches such as metal scraping or electronic beeps, and they would often want to control the noise in their environment. In terms of taste, they would have difficulty trying something new or changing their diet routine. And certain flavors may be unbearable, whether it's something sweet, sour, spicy, salty, and they can therefore be undereaters or picky eaters, eating only basically their favorite foods. For touch, they can be easily sent into a fight or flight response over small everyday sensations like being poked or being nudged or being bumped. And they might feel that the clothing tags on their clothes are too itchy, or the stitches on their clothes feel very itchy. For smell, sudden strong odors can lead to a fight and flight response as well, and they may have a difficult time eating certain foods because of the smell. In terms of the visual sense, they would be sensitive to fluorescent light or any higher sorts of lights, and they would have difficulty focusing more on sunny days, and they would prefer darker, gloomy rooms and would commonly get headaches. For someone who is a sensory avoider, on the other hand, with their hearing, they would have difficulty determining where a sound is specifically coming from, and they would struggle to focus their attention on the most important sound in the room. They would also have difficulties in their speech and determining similar sounds, like, for example, seal, seems, or seen. In terms of taste, they would have difficulty distinguishing between flavors, especially if the flavors are remotely similar. And they would have a hard time determining the temperatures of food or whether the food has gone bad. For touch, the sensory avoider impacts on their ability to know where they are being touched, or they would have difficulty knowing what they are touching without looking. These are just some examples of what it looks like to have sensory processing disorders within these quadrants. Within the smell sense, they would have difficulty determining the source of an odor and describing something by smell, especially if the scents are similar. And with visual, they would have many steps required to process the visual information, and they might miss things that are obstructing their way whilst walking. And looking into the other three senses that are not as known, within those two quadrants as well, so sensory sensitivity. For someone with a proprioception disorder in that sense, they would be distressed by movements of muscles and limbs, and therefore have difficulty in tasks such as getting dressed or walking down the stairs. In terms of the vestibular sense, they would experience dizziness or motion sickness often, and they may also have a fear of heights and feel unstable on their feet. With the interoceptive sense, a sensory sensitive person may find pounding heartbeats painful, or it might even inspire fear. And they might even use the restroom often to avoid painful bowel and bladder sensations. For a sensory avoider, on the other hand, a proprioception disorder in that quadrant looks like difficulty with planning movement, and they might even trip easily. For the vestibular sense, they may have difficulty knowing which direction they are facing, whether they are standing or lying down without visual cues. And the interoceptive sense, they would have difficulty interpreting their own body signals. such as how hungry or thirsty they are, how warm or cold they are, or even how tired versus energetic they are. So as I said, these are just some examples of what it looks like to have a processing disorder within the senses of these quadrants. So based on what I've said, we created a little quiz to see if it kind of makes sense and if you guys have some sort of understanding.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to ask, can you be across multiple sensory sensitivities? Like, can you be in this muscle one, be in there, but in the and when the smell one, you be back in one of the other sections, like, or if you're sensitive to that quadrant, are you sensitive right across the same quadrant?
No, you can break it down. If you have a sensory profile completed by an occupational therapist, they might break it down into these 4 categories, but it can also be broken down into your different senses as well. So yeah, that's right. You can be like sensory sensation avoiding in one category, but sensory sensitive in another one. So yeah, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Definitely. And as Kate said, the sensory profile would be a great way to look into what sort of areas you seem to be sensitive in. Okay, awesome. So going into the quiz, the first question is, you can write the answers in the chat box and we'll show the answers on the next page. So we've got 4 questions. The first 2 questions are here. So the stitching on my clothes is very irritating. Would you say this person is sensory sensitive, sensory seeking, or have low registration? The stitching on my clothes is very irritating.
Here we got one.
Yep, sensitive, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And before I show the answer for the first question, I'm going to ask the second question as well, and we'll show the answers on the next page. I have difficulty differentiating the words car, card, and cart. Would we say sensory sensitive, sensory avoiding, or low registration? Awesome. Thank you, Darren, for your response. Okay, you can show the answers on the next page, Kate. Awesome. Yeah, so the stitching on my clothes is very irritating. That is sensory sensitive, correct? So sensitive to the stitches, to the tags, and having difficulty differentiating between the words car, card, and cart is definitely sensory avoiding. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sensory avoiding. Did anyone mention that? No, we said low registration for that. Good guess though, Darren. Thank you for trying. We have 2 more questions. I may not notice when my hands or face is dirty. Is that sensory sensitive, sensory avoiding, or low registration? Okay, low registration, yep. All right. And the next question, I like to attend events with a lot of music. Seeking. Okay. Thank you, David. And thank you, Darren. You can show the answers, Kate. I just lost my slide as well. Yeah. Awesome. Low registration and sensory seeking. Well done, guys. All right. So now we'll have a little bit of a discussion. And based on the quadrants that we spoke about and the profiles, we'd like to hear what you guys feel like, which profile you fit into and what makes you feel like you fit into that profile. So is anyone willing to tell us what profile they feel it fit into, whether turning off their cameras, turning on their cameras, or even writing it down in the chat? We'd love to hear what you guys have to say.
We've got our hands up from Suzanne. Did you want to ask a question, Suzanne?
I just wanted to say what profile I think I fit.
Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah, the oversensitive, hypersensitive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
What
I
makes
think-
you feel like that?
Yeah, especially to noise
Mm-hmm.
and any kind of sudden unexpected noise. So it's like I'm on high alert
Yeah.
all the time.
Mhm.
Yeah, and any kind of high frequency.
Yeah.
And then so at home I manage it because our neighbours have a pool pump and for me it's too loud. So I'm wearing earplugs and noise cancelling headphones all the time. But then I also noticed that just gone into avoiding, like social. So there's that balance, kind of exposing myself bit by bit, but then very easily, like, no, I can't go here and I can't go there. And then I come home and now I'm just exhausted and have to sleep for hours. So,
yeah, so it sort of overwhelms the nervous system because you've got this constant sound, which is like really amplified for you.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I see that a lot with people with FND is this like almost extreme sensory sensitivity, and the sound is one that's really common. So people are using the noise cancelling headphones quite a bit, but it like completely overwhelms people's nervous system. And then for you, how do you feel that it impacts you? Like, do you get seizures or anything with noise, or is it just the fatigue?
Oh yeah, no. Seizures, suddenly can't walk.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes collapsing, full body paralysis. So I've just got to really manage things to not escalate, but I can manage things to a certain level, but just some other stress or something unexpected comes in, and then I have what I call an episode. So I've kind of been avoiding going out a lot, partly the fear of collapsing and paralysis, and then an ambulance coming and taking me to hospital. It's like the last place I want to go. So, yeah, I'm kind of trapped a bit at home with noise, and then so just finding that balance of trying to manage that.
Yeah. Okay. Darren's made a comment, with noise I don't have a problem unless I need to actually use my brain for something else, so not sure where I fit. So that might be that you can cope with like one sense, but if you've got to use your brain for something else, so have two inputs into your brain, that might be where it gets into that overwhelmed state. So are there any other people with hands up? Anyone else want to say anything or comment on where you might fit into this sensory profile?
Sorry, I had my hand up. But
sorry, there you are, David. Sorry.
I had my hand up, and then I realised the video was off. So that works well. No, well, I actually just relate to what the other lady just said about the noise. But the other one that I find is light. I actually need a lot of light around me because it's I find it very dark and hard to see things if I haven't got the light in the room. So I'm not sure what sensory that is, and that's why I was asking about the cross sensories, because I can relate to certain things in the sensitivity one, but then in the low recognition one, I could also relate to certain things.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And that we do see that with FND. So when I do the sensory profiles, I'll generally see what came up back here is all of these. So most people will have low registration. In some areas, they'll be sensory sensitive and sensory avoiding, and sensory seeking often comes really low. So the red bars is what I traditionally see.
I can't see the red bars because I'm colourblind. But
okay. Yeah, this is what they put in the image. So the big bars. So
I guess what you were talking
so the
about.
big bars. So with low registration is red, sensory sensitive is red, and sensation avoiding is red, and then sensory seeking is really low. So that's what I commonly see.
With the sensory seeking, like there are different things that are on, and you want to be at, but you're not there, and you're sort of really feeling down because you're not there. Is that classed as a sensory seeking or not? How would that come in? I'll give you an example. Like, you know, my wife will be out with the grandchildren and they'll be having fun in the park, and I'm not there for whatever reason, but I want to be there. You know, how would that come into it?
That may also not necessarily be like a sensory thing, unless you were like desiring to be on the swings or something. So if you're not there, are you avoiding it for a reason, or is it just for your health? So that might be more like an emotional thing rather than a sensory processing thing.
All right. Yep.
Potentially.
Understand. Okay.
And we have another message. I have problems with noise, but also have problems with bright lights. Turns into a vomiting headache. Smell of food makes me vomit. I also have a problem with speech. I also get on and off like spiders in toes, and told it was sensory looking. Not sure where I fit. Okay, so it looks like there's sensory sensitivity. So with the noise, with the light, that's like, and the smell, so that's like quite extreme sensory sensitivities. If noise, light, smells of food would make you vomit. Problems with speech, that could be more of a motor thing like FND. I also get on and off like spiders. I'm not sure if that's and I was told it's sensory looking. So that could be, I think there's some typos in there around sensory looking would be sensory seeking. So you might be seeking sensation in touch. So if you're desiring massage, so the sensory seeking for touch and proprioception. Yep. Okay, are there any other comments? Because we're on a screen. I can't see if anyone else wants to make a comment. So if you want to make a comment, you can type it or you can jump in.
I think we have one from Ross Kate. Trying to focus on items at a supermarket will end up with things flying off shelves around me, causes nausea and headaches.
So does it look like items are flying off the shelves?
I think I'm off mute now.
That looks like a visual processing.
Yeah. Especially if I'm just trying to focus and find something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I can get quite clumsy and stumble around then.
Yeah, so I'd say that's a visual processing disorder, which is what we also see in FND as well, and causes nausea and headache. So trying to focus on that is sort of like causing nervous system overwhelm, which can lead to the nausea and the headaches.
Yeah.
Okay, are there any other comments? So I can't see everyone if anyone is jumping in.
I don't see any more comments as well, Kate.
Okay. So Suzanne, is your hand up from before?
Yeah.
Yep, cool. Okay, we'll move on. Okay.
Thank you everyone for sharing your thoughts. We really appreciate it. And it really has given us some insight. I'll be passing over to Jenny now, who's going to go into a little bit more about the strategies and things that you can use to help with the sensory processing disorder problems that you may be having. So over to you, Jenny.
Thanks, Nabiha. So today we're going to talk to you about how you can identify your sensory triggers, how you can develop strategies to manage these triggers, how you can modify your environment to reduce the triggers, and lastly, we'll show you some tools and resources you may find helpful as well. So along the way, we would love for you to share your own personal experiences during our discussion times. We want to acknowledge you as the experts of your own personal experiences with FND, and we would really value, appreciate, and thank you for your input today. Okay, so here I have a self-observation recording sheet. So recognizing your triggers may be helpful so that you can put some strategies in place to help reduce the likelihood or severity of your seizures. Keeping a recording sheet of when your seizures occur can help you to identify the possible triggers. You can use a recording sheet like this on the slide, or you can simply record the who, what, where, and when in an exercise book or on a sheet of paper. So this can just help you sort of identify if there's any common themes for when your triggers occur. And you might notice actually going through all of the different senses that we've spoken about and the sort of sensitivities or seeking behaviors, that it might be something in particular to do with the sensory input that you're seeking or trying to avoid that might be causing your seizures. So we'll just move on to the next slide. Thanks, Kate.
So I know some of you did mention some of the triggers that cause the sensory processing disorders that you guys have in sort of senses. So some of the ones that people did mention are like the fluorescent lights, or Ross mentioned about focusing on the supermarket items on the shelves, noise. Is there any other things that people are coming across as triggers, and what sort of strategies are you currently using in place to help deal with your triggers? I know, I believe it was Suzanne who also mentioned about using the noise, the headphones. Was that right, Suzanne?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any other things that you that are triggering, and any other strategies that you're currently using?
Yeah, probably mostly trying to distract myself. So, say with the pool pump noise, there's the noise, but also then the emotional trigger of the neighbours. It seems like intentionally trying to drive us out of our house. So it's kind of a double whammy. So the emotional stress, anxiety builds up. So distracting myself seems to be, the best thing. Catching when, those loops, or, this is unfair, and, all of that. So whether I get up and do something, or even if it might be distract myself, the television, or so just to shift, but also notice, okay, it's an F&D loop. It's not necessarily reality.
Yeah.
It's a loop. So being diagnosed finally is really helped, because it's like, oh, okay, it's just that. Yeah, so distraction techniques, grounding techniques, getting up, moving, and focusing on someone else.
Yeah.
Calling someone, to saying, how are you? To take the focus off me.
Yeah. Those sounds like some really good techniques. Thanks, Suzanne. Does anybody else have anything in mind?
In the car, one of the things that I was taught was, because when you're traveling in the car and you're getting sensory overload with buildings, cars whizzing past you and that sort of stuff, one of the things I do is put a sleeping mask on, which shuts my eyes off, and then the headphones take out the noise. I've done that. I did a 5-week trip out to Western Queensland last year, and I found that very good for that sort of thing. And
do you feel like it helps with like motion sickness and that you get in the car as well? Does that also kind of help with that sort of thing?
Well, the funny thing is, I don't have issues with motion sickness
or
anything like that. It's just it's just that sensory, and being able
overload.
Able to rest is the biggest factor while you are traveling. And another one, when I am going into seizures, is we do either the alphabet, and we use the alphabet as a thing to take your mind away from what's actually happening. It may be boys' names, and we'll go through the letters of the alphabet, or we might try counting backwards from 50 to 0, and things like that. Things that will take your mind away from what is actually going on. And most times it does work, sometimes it doesn't. And you've got to go into the breathing strategy. So
yeah, that sounds great. Thank you, David. I think we have a couple of
Yeah, we've got some comments. And Montana's had her hand up for a while.
Okay.
Montana, did you want to have a chat? You're on mute. Yep, there you are. Awesome.
Yeah, so basically I live in a house with 4 siblings and they get very, very loud and annoying. It normally triggers a few seizures, and sometimes if they touch me and I didn't want them to, then it triggers a seizure.
Wow.
Pretty much to, I don't know, kind of help, I do count things. So like I count different things around the room. I have noise cancelling earphones, so I put those in and listen to like very like not loud music to help. Yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah, the counting seems to be a good one.
Yeah,
not something that we would have looked at or thought about before speaking to you guys. And even the names, the letters of the alphabet seems like a really cool one too, David. I'm not sure if other people have thought about that before. We have some more in the chat. I think it was up to Carla. Shower water feels like I'm bathing in glue. Wow.
So that would be possibly like a touch. So does it feel like when it is on your skin, it feels like glue? So it's sensation, like a sensation thing on your skin. Where's Carla?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's really it's like, it feels like, yeah, you're just bathing in glue, honey, glug stuff, and it's like, yeah, it's just really weird to explain. And there's also because I've got quite a few as well, but another one is like the walking, like if there's a new kind of or a different surface that's in any way unstable, it kind of I feel really unstable in my body, and it's like what you said, Kate, it's really super amplified. And even like if a helicopter or something comes over, like it's like I can detect it way before it gets here, kind of thing. It's like, yeah, your sensory system is just really
Overactive.
super duper switched on.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, it's really overactive, which is what we see a lot. And it's a bit like it's just not regulating normally. You're not having any sort of dampening effects. Getting used to.
And new environments, like our Aldi changed, you know, how the shop is set up. And the first time that I went in there after it, it was just like I wanted to be pulled to the ground because it was so overstimulating or something. Like I don't even know how. And the beeps on the machine, it's like, whoa. And the smells, complete sensory overload. But yeah, I haven't learnt many ways to combat it other than just like I've got dogs and I pat them a lot. But like when you're actually in it, I haven't found a lot of ways yet to bring it down, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, with the sound, you can start to like block out the sound, like people have mentioned with like earplugs and noise cancelling headphones. So sound and sight can be addressed with sort of masking. The smell is one that can be really hard because it's hard to mask smells.
Yep.
And we've got Naomi, taking someone with me and focusing on them. So that's a distraction, getting them to monitor me and distract me as much as possible, especially with pain levels, as other things can be overloading and people can bring me back. I agree with what she is saying. Yeah. So pain is another thing where it's sort of like the body is again overstimulated. Like a lot of people with FND have quite, you know, severe pain. So the body is oversensitive to pain in the way that the brain registers pain, in the same way that it's over-registering sound and light. Does anyone else have any comments or things that they want to bring up before I move on? No. Okay.
Thank you all for your input. Back to you, Jenny.
Thanks, Nabiha. Kate, thank you. Really appreciate all the things that you shared with us. Actually, you've included some things that we haven't thought about, and some things that we have as well. So on this slide, I guess in terms of hearing, you're all pretty across finding distractions with music to kind of take your mind off things. Some types of music can have a calming effect, whereas others can have more intense auditory stimulation. So I guess, again, it depends on if you're sort of seeking that input or avoiding it, or just you want to create a sense of calm. So that can also be a strategy for distraction as well when you're feeling a bit overwhelmed. Again, headphones is something that we've had a bit of a lengthy discussion about. So that seems to be something that's quite effective and useful. It might also be helpful to minimize background noise. So when possible, turning off the radio or music or the TV to avoid that overload if you're particularly sensitive. Thanks. Next slide, Kate. So in terms of sight, some people find that they're especially sensitive to the sunlight. So you can reduce the intensity of the stimuli by wearing sunglasses or regular glasses with a tint in them, and also try to avoid fluorescent or flashing lights. A broad brim hat or a scarf can be useful to block out the harsh or intense stimuli. And also meditation apps such as Headspace or Calm can be helpful, as they include calming images that can help when you're feeling overly stimulated. There's also some breathing exercises, I believe, on those apps too, which you might find helpful. Thanks, Kate. So in terms of touch, some people can feel particularly sensitive to, I guess, like the feeling of stickiness on their hands, or if you touch particular things and then you might feel a bit of discomfort after that. So carrying some wipes to wipe your hands to just get rid of that gross feeling, I guess, for lack of a better word, can be helpful. I just see that someone's got, with the breathing things, if asthmatic can be a problem, any suggestions? I might throw that question over to you, Kate, if you're able to answer that one.
No, I mean, with the asthma, that is something that, you know, people have when they're sort of, you're restricting the amount of air that's coming in, and you're already having lung issues. So having things over the face, it is particularly problematic. So if you're touch sensitive, that's problematic. And then if you've got asthma, obviously it's going to be even more problematic. Just trying to get back to that. Where did the chat box go? I don't think I've answered the question. I've lost the chat box.
I was just saying that, so if you're asthmatic, and, you know, I mentioned breathing exercises and all those sort of apps, you know, when you focus on your breathing, you're sort of becoming even more sensitive to it, if you're sensitive to things anyway. And so is there any other alternatives or suggestions?
So focusing on your breathing, like doing the deep breathing exercises, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because it will trigger, for me, things like that, even inductions to hypnosis and that, if that sort of thing, it will trigger asthma attacks, because I'm really bad with my asthma anyway, and some people it will, if you're sort of focusing on the breathing in ways that sort of it will, you know, I suppose trigger.
Okay. Is there any sort of, I don't know, anxiety thing that might be linked to the asthma? Like if you're focusing on the breathing, can that then?
No, it's more like it can be just passing that air over in a very forced, you know, way.
Okay.
Sort of you can trigger the lining of the lungs.
Okay. So that might be more of a question to an asthma expert rather than sensory stuff, I would think, because there's probably stuff related to asthma that I'm not.
Yeah, I just thought you might have alternatives, but that's all right.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I certainly think that if it is going to aggravate your situation, I would avoid it. I wouldn't even go there, to be honest.
Yeah. And also with these things, it's also around picking and choosing what works for you. So something, you'll find one thing that you'll really relate to, and that'll be good for you. And there'll be things that you don't relate to, or things that you might feel aggravate your kind of sensory needs. So it's sort of, trialing and picking and choosing. This one works for me, this one doesn't. And don't pursue with things that are aggravating for you.
Yeah, like Kate said, it's not a one size fits all. Some of these things will be appropriate and some won't be. It also depends on your sensory profile. And you might find sometimes things are successful and then other times they're not. So it's very much a trial and error sort of process. So discuss the wipes and the, I think I said that you can use a bandana or a scarf to cover your face or your neck or anywhere in particular that you want to shield from certain stimuli. Some people find that silly putty or TheraPutty can be useful because the resistance when you're pulling it can create a tactile, it can actually decrease tactile sensitivity. So I think that's sort of like building up your resistance as well. There's some things that you can do in small doses to sort of help overcome the sensitivity. And then brushing or beanbag tapping can provide deep pressure to touch, and it can calm the mind and body.
Do people know what brushing and beanbag tapping are? No, can we explain what it is, please?
So my understanding is that with the beanbag tapping, you have a beanbag and it's got weight in it. So applying pressure to your limbs with the beanbag can create that, I guess, proprioceptive input as well. And again, brushing, you can get a TheraBrush to use. So the specific brushes that you can use. I think we're going to create a handout to supplement this presentation. So I can put a bit more information into that with those strategies if you're interested as well.
And with the brush, it's sort of like you can just brush your skin. So it's detecting, when you brush your skin with this particular brush, it's stimulating all your pressure sensors in the skin. So it can help to sort of provide regulating influences in your brain.
Thanks, Kate. So in terms of smell, some people find essential oils can be useful for aromatherapy. So there's some senses that can calm the body and others that can increase arousal or energy. So there's a list here of the different senses that might be useful. And again, we can put this on the handout for your reference. For taste, sour or cinnamon lollies, these strong tastes can help provide a calming oral input. And some foods, for people that are sensory seeking in particular, crunchy, salty, or sweet foods can have a calming effect as well. So everyone has different foods that calm them. So if you can find something that is calming for you, then if you can keep that on hand in your purse or your bag for when you need that input, that might be helpful. And the same with a water bottle. The Camelback, for example, have a little bit of a chewy sort of straw, which provides a strong calming oral input. So some of these can be things, so if you're seeking sensory input, because it has a calming effect on you, then it can be useful sort of to deter when you're feeling like on the verge of overload in a way. So some can, be useful strategies to have in your toolkit. So the next slide.
I'll just say something here. What we also find is sometimes when people are having seizures, some strong sensory input can also pull the body out of the seizure, so that if your body's in this overwhelmed state, your nervous system's in this overwhelmed state. So something like one of these smells that's sort of like a distraction thing and helps to regulate the brain. So using particular smells might help to bring you out of a seizure. Some people say putting lemon juice on your lips, or mint, or smelling toothpaste, something that's quite strong. It's sort of got that distraction thing, but it's also that sensory input. So it can help to regulate the nervous system. And even like these sour lollies, like it's, your body, your mind is diverted, nervous system is diverted into this strong sensory input, which can help the overload.
Thank you.
You there, Kate?
Yeah.
Sorry. I just wanted to add to that. Just one of the things I do is use ice.
Yeah.
And I can use that on the skin to really, and that does bring me out of a lot of those overloads.
And the ice one is one that's come up before. And again, that may be one that some people will like and some people don't, but ice is also used when people have seizures. Putting ice on a person's skin can again help to pull them out of the seizure, which here, using an ice pack, a cold pack might do the same thing. And again, it's working out for your sensory profile what works for you. Probably using ice wouldn't work for me because I don't like the cold. But it's a lot of trial and error.
So in terms of vestibular, some people who have motion sickness find those C bands can be quite useful for sort of decreasing the stimulation. They work by pushing on the pressure point in the wrist. Again, as Kate mentioned, the ice or the cold packs can be helpful to decrease motion sickness as well, or reduce the severity or the duration of seizures. And then some easy movements for people that are seeking, that vestibular input, such as rocking in a rocking chair or swinging in a hammock, or even a swing can be useful as well if you're seeking that. And for some people, you might find it calming as well. Okay, and finally with the proprioception. So things like elastic bands, heavy duty ones, provide a proprioceptive input. A TheraBand works in the same way as an elastic band, but they're larger, so they can be used for even more proprioceptive input. Weighted blankets are also good because they provide proprioceptive input. This can have a really calming effect as well. It's very grounding. And then finally, getting an exercise ball and having someone else roll it from your feet to your chest. Wouldn't recommend going over the face, obviously. Applying a little bit of pressure as well can also create that proprioceptive input. So these are all strategies. Obviously, as we mentioned before, it's not a list of all the things we recommend you do. Some things will work for you, some things won't, but it will also be beneficial to figure out where you fit into the sensory profile to determine which things might also be beneficial. So then the next slide, I've got some other strategies for things that you can have in sort of like your overwhelm toolkit. So maybe a change up in your environment or a removal of the harmful stimuli might be effective. So if you're feeling particularly overwhelmed, it's okay to go and have a nap and take yourself away from the situation if you're feeling like you're on, the verge of sort of getting overstimulated, or find a quiet, dark room for those people particularly that are sensitive to the sunlight. Take a time out in a quiet place might also be a useful strategy. Again, you can redirect your attention. So we had the example before of counting back from 50 or going through the alphabet and saying something that begins with each of the letters of the alphabet. You might want to take 5 deep breaths, take a bath. Something that is effective even when you have sort of unuseful thought processes, if you're thinking about things that are not useful, or you find it's not an effective kind of headspace to be in, visualizing something, for instance, a yellow balloon can take your mind off that negative thought process, or even if you're sort of, feeling a bit worked up, or doing some box breathing. Are you familiar with the box breathing technique? Again, for some people, I think, Naomi, this might not be effective for you, but it can also sort of get you focusing on something other than your thoughts, the breathing.
And the breathing exercise is meant to be really good to regulate the nervous system and sort of reduce that autonomic arousal. So it is used quite a lot in FND to reduce autonomic arousal. Is like focusing on the breath in and out and trying to slow your breathing can help to downregulate the autonomic arousal, which then can decrease FND symptoms.
I think it also has a very calming effect. Yeah, you know what? I have 2 dogs and they come and lie on me in the morning, and it's very comforting. It's like this weight lifted off your shoulders sort of thing. It's amazing how effective it is. Yeah.
And that can be a little bit like the way that it's soothing.
That's the word for it, very soothing.
Yeah, it is. That's self-soothing.
Yeah.
And you've got the touch, sensory touch there, and then you've also got the weight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. I think everyone should have dogs. They're very therapeutic. So deep pressure, push on a door or a wall can also create that. I guess that's also bit of proprioception input there. Again, weighted lap pad. So if you don't have a weighted blanket, you can have like something that's, I've seen people use a bag of rice, like a quite big bag that you can get from the supermarket. And I've seen them put them in a laptop cover and having that on their waist. Obviously, you don't want it to be too heavy, but that's something that you could possibly try. Using a sleeping bag, like if it's quite tight and you've that can create a sense of deep pressure. And again, weighted blankets come up again.
Yeah, someone's made a comment about weighted blanket and asthma. So you can just get a weighted lap blanket. So for some people, having like weight on their chest can be like, it might trigger some things.
Yeah.
Again, it's a trial and error, but you can get a small weighted blanket that's just a lap blanket, so it doesn't go on your chest. Again, you've got to get the right size for a weighted blanket. It's like a proportion of your own weight, and not going too high. And again, for some people it will work, for some people it doesn't work.
Nano rug version.
Nano rug version, yeah.
That sounds cool.
Yeah, that does sound cool. So Jenny's given quite a bit of strategies there. Does anybody have any other strategies that haven't been mentioned yet that they'd like to share with the rest of the group that would be helpful for them? I guess basically when you were talking about overload toolkit is when you've reached that heightened point and you want to calm yourself down. What sort of other things, strategies would you use that haven't been mentioned?
I think people did mention about having someone that they can speak to distract them. So I feel like that's a good strategy that was mentioned before.
Yeah, I think Suzanne has her hand up as well, Kate.
Okay.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Person that put heads.
Yep, doodling.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, doodling. Yeah. I see that a lot of a lot of people that we've met with F&D have a very creative side to them, and we find that amazing to see that, you know, they really take out their inner creativity as a way to calm themselves down, which is great. So Kerry was saying about painting, that seems really cool. And Naomi's talking about soft fluffy blankets that can help. Yeah, definitely. I think that everybody loves the feeling of something soft on their skin. That's great. Anything else? All right, thanks for that. We'll move on to the next slide.
I apologise in advance. I've got two very noisy dogs at the moment because the mailman's here. So they've timed that very badly. Sorry, just one moment. I apologise. So in terms of the environment, environmental supports can be used as well to reduce sensory triggers, or alternatively give you the sensory input that your body needs. So for example, you might like to try sitting on a yoga ball instead of a desk chair, because that gives you that sort of vestibular input from bouncing up and down on it. Using visual reminders such as Post-it notes. This one is an environmental support in that it can take the load off your memory rather than having to rely on too much. Sort of is a memory strategy, which I guess can be calming in a sense that you're not trying to remember too many things. And the same goes for having sort of like a common area to keep all of your, like your glasses, your phone, your wallet and keys, so that you're not constantly kind of like looking for those when you leave the house. So again, that can kind of, I guess, be a strategy that can reduce like anxiety in a way. Also, other environmental supports might be a white noise machine for those people that like that sensory input. Also, if you are particularly sensitive to like fluorescent lights, replacing those with full spectrum lights can be useful. And again, aromatherapy. Those diffusers are quite lovely in terms of they have some nice little lights on them, and that can be quite calming and nice for the environment as well.
Does anyone else have any other environmental supports that they'd like to add to that list? I think Jenny's given quite a good range of examples, but if anybody else has anything that they'd like to share, please do so.
I think there's some good stuff on YouTube in terms of sound, like really calming sound, like nature sounds, that kind of stuff. They can be really quite calming and nice.
Nature sounds, rain sounds. I know my daughter loves to listen to
rainforest, little birds.
Yeah.
Anyone else got any ideas? Nothing there.
Yeah. All right. No worries. We can move on then.
Okay. Feel free if you think of anything to just add it into the chat. Okay. So the last thing I'm going to go through with you today is a sensory diet. So a sensory diet is an individualized plan of physical activities and accommodations to help a person get the sensory input that their body needs. The concept was first created by occupational therapists, Wilbarger and Wilbarger in 1991. It was designed to provide the sensory input needed to stay focused and organized throughout the day. So focused or calm, in other words. For example, some people feel overwhelmed and need to get to a calmer state, or some people may feel lethargic and sluggish and need some activities to feel alert. Implementing a sensory diet into your daily life might help benefit you too. Self-regulate alertness, increase your attention span, calm your central nervous system, and reduce anxiety, as well as contribute to avoiding overload, shutdowns, or burnout. Essentially, the main goal of a sensory diet is to prevent sensory and emotional overload by meeting the individual's nervous system needs. So we do recommend that you speak to an OT if you have one to put together a sensory diet. However, if this is not financially feasible for everyone, so I'm going to take you through the steps on how you can do this today. It'll be a bit of an abridged version, to be honest. And again, this isn't sort of prescriptive. I know the words diet, a lot of people struggle to stick to diet. So what I would recommend with this is to take away from it what you think is useful and don't try to make it too restrictive or difficult, because it's then not going to be achievable. So the steps to create this sensory diet are: one, the first step is to plan a sensory diet. You need to identify the sensory needs to work its best. So it might be helpful to keep a sensory diary or sensory observation checklist like the one that we showed you earlier in terms of recording the who, what, why, when, and where. For instance, you might find yourself getting irritable after spending time in noisy environments, or you might find yourself struggling to focus in meetings. During these instances, it would be helpful to make notes of what happened and when, and the consequences. If you start by identifying your sensory needs, then you can meet them with your sensory diet. So then the next step is to select your sensory diet activities. You need to choose activities that will meet your sensory needs throughout the day. Most sensory activities are either energizing or calming, but what might be energizing for one person might be calming for another. If you're struggling to sit still in a meeting or have high levels of anxiety throughout the day, you need to select calming activities for your sensory diet. Alternatively, if you are finding it difficult to get out of bed, you might need an energizing activity. So then you can make a list of about maybe 10 to 15 calming, energizing activities to choose from. Sensory meals are calming or energizing activities that provide a large amount of sensory input. For example, a walk, a light workout, or a bubble bath. So then you'll refer to your list of calming, energizing activities and choose 3 to 5 to use as sensory meals. Use these activities in the sensory meals section of the sensory diet worksheet, and we will provide this for you in the handout after the workshop today. So we recommend that your sensory diet includes some activities that you definitely do every day. However, don't feel like you have to do all of the ones that you mentioned on your worksheet, such as using a weighted blanket to relax in the evenings or singing to energizing music in the morning. Sensory snacks are easily accessible calming tools or activities, such as the ones that I mentioned earlier with the toolkit. For example, listening to music, drinking a cup of tea, eating a snack, or going for a short walk. Refer to your list of calming, organising activities and choose 3 to 5 activities to use as sensory snacks. And then we have the environmental supports, which are adjustments that you can make at school, work, or at home. And those are the things that I talked about before, a little earlier with this slide with the picture. So you can refer to those when you receive the slides. And then this hideout space is a place where you can go to have quieter alone time during the day. So that's sort of like your haven for when you're feeling a bit overwhelmed or at, breaking point or overload. And then finally, it's important to have some leisure activities as part of your sensory diet, and a good way to get additional sensory input. So on the next slide, we've got this, I'll provide this on the handout. So this is sort of like a little bit of a run sheet of where you can write down the meals that you're going to have in the day. So a sensory diet includes a balance of sensory meals, sensory snacks, environmental supports, and hideout spaces, as well as those leisure activities to keep you functioning at your best. Sensory meals should be scheduled as part of your daily routine. I would recommend maybe trying 1 to 2 meals each day. So then here are some other examples of the snacks. These are the simple little things that you can do as well as needed to keep your body comfortable and focused throughout the day. You may even want to create a special bag or box with the sensory snacks you may find comforting or energizing. Things you can include in your sensory box or bag might include chewing gum, mints, a bag of pretzels, moisturizing cream, headphones, or a water bottle with a chewy straw lid. You can carry your bag or box around with you so that you have sensory snacks at your disposal. So with these, like the moisturizer, some people find it quite soothing to have like a little bit of a hand massage or like applying the moisturizer with a bit of deep pressure. This little picture of the little peas is a fidget toy. So that can be quite, if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, that can be quite, I guess, calming. As I mentioned before, some people seek that sensory input like orally. So the crunch of the popcorn can be quite calming. And then with the chewing gum, mint can be quite alerting. So if you're feeling like you're getting a bit fatigued or lethargic, a mint can actually have a bit of an energizing property. So then I've included some activities for your sensory diet. So with these, there's more examples. So I'm giving you a lot of different ideas here today. So hopefully you don't walk away feeling too overwhelmed by this. But you'll have some strategies in place if you feel like you need a little, break. So we've got things like proprioception. So for those people seeking that, carrying a backpack or even vacuuming is considered heavy work. So when you are able to do something like that, if you're seeking that proprioceptive input, that can be beneficial. Again, for vestibular, things like rocking in a chair or swinging on a swing or lying in a hammock. Tactile, the hand massage or squeezing a stress ball. Auditory, you might find that using noise cancelling headphones can be helpful. So these are all things that you could include in your sensory diet. And then if we go to the next slide, there's other ones that you can have a look at in your own time. So finally, with the example of the sensory diet, this just shows you how to use that worksheet to set out the strategies that you can use throughout the day. So with this example, the person needs to energize in the morning. So they're going to have some crunchy cereal and sing to high energy music. At lunchtime, they may experience an energy dip. So they're going to drink a cup of energizing peppermint tea. And in the late afternoon, they may feel overloaded. So they're going to listen to calming music. And in the evening, they're going to relax under the weighted blanket. Okay.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of information there. So if anyone has any questions about that, please feel free to ask.
Yeah, now would be a
or
good
any
time,
or any comments.
Yeah, for questions or comments. I know Jenny's given a lot of different ideas. So if you guys have any comments that you'd like to add or anything you agree on or don't agree on, we'd be happy to hear. because we are still learning a lot about the condition and what sort of things help you guys out. So it'd be great to hear your guys' input as well.
I guess it's also working at your pace. So some people might not be up to vacuuming, but doing
absolutely not. Yeah.
Alternatives. So that can be like a deep pressure through another means.
Yeah. So as I said as well, like what works for someone might not work for another. And the vacuuming is like a very heavy work. So that would be something maybe on a good day if you were capable and was seeking that kind of input, then that would be something that you would go for. But obviously it's hard to also plan that kind of activity, not knowing what your function will be like on the day. So some of these are not as applicable as others.
And then you might also find that for you, it works at different times. So you might need different sensory inputs depending on how your function is at that certain time.
Yeah. Even I think it would be beneficial just to start with one sort of meal a day and maybe have some snacks, just.
Got to chat. I find drinking hot coffee slowly can help me calm down. I have many coffees. Probably a bit the same with that. Yeah, I like the coffee.
Yeah. See, personally, having too many coffees can elevate my anxiety. So as we see here, like what works for one person doesn't for another. But we might need a lot more energy. So coffee is quite stimulating. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yep. And Suzanne's got her hand raised.
I have trouble regulating my body temperature. Like I feel I get cold very easily and I overheat really easily.
Oh, wow.
Any suggestions?
I'm seeing that come up quite a bit. In MS, it is recognised that people can have problems with temperature regulation. I haven't seen any written literature on temperature regulation and FND, but it's something that I come across when I do functional capacity assessments. Yeah, and Darren's also said body temp is one of my issues as well. And I know people who struggle, like in Queensland and the northern part of Australia, really talk about the heat can be really hard to help regulating. And I'm seeing, people needing to get air conditioning that keep the room at a certain temperature. So people are using environmental controls to help with temperature regulation. Because I am seeing that come up with FND. And it doesn't really surprise me, given that there's issues with the nervous system, there's issues with how the brain functions. It would make sense that for some people, this is an issue. So the main one with that is using external temperature controls. Does anyone else have any feedback, comments? Nope, I'm not saying anything else. All right, you want to keep going? What would you put down as your sensory meals?
Yes, anyone's
just being flexible with that. So having lots of different ideas to draw on at different times.
I can put some ideas for different meals on the worksheet as well, just so that you don't have to come up with them all on your own. But you might find some, again, will work for you. You might try them and think it's going to be great and then find that it's not very effective, or vice versa.
And then you might find days when it works well and days when it doesn't. So when it doesn't work well, you try something else. Touching plants, that could probably be quite therapeutic. You connecting with that.
That sounds lovely.
Yeah, so we talk about patting our pets, but being out in the garden and connecting with nature, a lot of people actually say that their symptoms improve. Like people might say, oh, I went camping and my symptoms improved. Like when they're out with nature and sort of away from artificial stimulation, like away from, shopping centres and lights and noise and traffic, etc. And they go out camping, going into nature with just nature sounds, can be really therapeutic.
It sounds
people do say their symptoms improve in nature.
I think it's also camping is very simple, and it's not taking yourself away from all those distractions.
Yeah, and those things that overwhelm the nervous system.
It's very grounding.
Yeah, and away from the artificial things, like maybe people don't cope well with, there's probably sort of, Wi-Fi signals and all that sort of stuff that we're around at home that we don't notice, but the body is detecting.
So finally, these are just, as I mentioned, that you can create some environmental supports to help you, and also having a space to sort of go to, or like a retreat when you need some time to yourself to re-regulate, can be really helpful. So here is just some more examples of environmental strategies. So for instance, having a blockout blind to shade that really harsh sunlight if you're really sensitive to that. For children, I know particularly with children with autism, they quite like having a teepee or a little tent that they can kind of just go into and calm themselves down and re-regulate. Hammocks are nice because they've got that vestibular input, so you can swing in the hammock if you don't find that makes you feel seasick. And those little egg chairs are quite nice too, nice little oasis. And then finally, I've got just some examples on the one of the last slides about just some leisure activities, because they're a great way to find that sensory input. And so these are some examples. So you might like to try just the next slide, please, Kate. Thank you. So perhaps singing or some light yoga, knitting, if you've got the fine motor capacity to do that. Someone mentioned painting before. Drawing is quite an inexpensive hobby that you can do. You just need a pencil and a piece of paper, and then reading as well.
Yeah, and in the past, people have talked about drawing being really helpful, painting being helpful, trauma-sensitive yoga, which is not as strenuous. So you might find that yoga at the gym is a really strenuous exercise. But trauma-sensitive yoga, Tai Chi and Qigong, you can find like some seated versions online on YouTube. They can be really calming for the nervous system. And singing is also meant to be really good to help regulate your nervous system as well. Okay, what activities do you enjoy?
Does anybody have any other activities that they like doing for their leisure? I know when we were talking to another person with F&D, they were telling us about doing diamond art. I thought that was really interesting. Photography, Darren, that sounds really cool.
Yeah, so that's sort of like your visual calming, and especially if you're going out in nature, you've got the nature benefits there as well. Diamond painting can be really good, that sort of mindfulness, just focusing on the dots. I've got a few people doing diamond painting.
Paint by numbers is another one as well that can be quite a good distraction as well.
And the Mandela art, the mindfulness
Mandela art.
arts. We got any other ideas? Any hands up? No.
Oh, Lego. That sounds fun.
Cool. Are you building like models or something?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's very cool. Lots of creative pursuits here.
Yeah, and creative is really good. And I think that sort of, with FND, like the brain is in this overwhelmed state. So you want things that are going to get you out of the overwhelmed state. So anything that's calming for you, oh, wow.
Oh, that's
amazing.
Yeah.
It takes months to do, but it is very good. Quite a long time.
Yeah.
So again, that sort of also can be going into that distraction thing. And we know with FND that the distraction is really important. So it's diverting your brain into something else.
Yeah, it's a bit of diversional therapy too with the leisure pursuits. Definitely.
That's great. Thank you, everyone, for your suggestions.
No.
I think that's it with the suggestions.
Yeah, with the leisure activities as well, you could always perhaps make a point of exploring maybe one leisure activity a month until you find something that you really enjoy, if you feel up to it. So again, pace yourself and do it at your own pace and what you feel comfortable with.
A couple of people actually mentioned they enjoyed doing things like baking. I guess everybody's different. Some people liked being in the kitchen. Some people like doing cross stitching. So yeah, as Jenny said, it would be good to, I guess, maybe try different things and see what suits you best, because a lot of the times, unless you try something, you don't actually know if you enjoy it or not. So even giving things a go would be great.
And also like sort of developing your own menu that you can pick from. So having a list of things which you can try on different days, and you've sort of got your choice there, and you're like, okay, well, what do I need? Do I need something stimulating, calming, meditating?
Yeah, that's a great idea. It doesn't have to be super prescriptive, because it can also seem quite overwhelming when you're given a list of steps on how to do it, and if you don't stick to it, feeling like you're not successful. So I think, a menu is a great way of putting it. And then shopping when you need it.
Yeah.
Or ordering off the menu.
Good analogy.
I have a box idea. Yeah. So and I've also had I've had a box with a lot of different sensory things in it, with different smells and like little cards and fiddly things. So that could be really good. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I think Okay, that's fine.
Okay. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, David. We appreciate it.
We've reached the end now.
Yeah.
Staying.
Yeah.
It did get quite long.
Yeah.
Any questions that people might have, or anything else that people want to share? My daughter likes to swim and finds it relaxing. Yeah, and that's the issue around the seizures. But swimming's actually really good. A lot of people find swimming good because also it's your non-weight bearing physical activity, so people are not in pain when they're swimming. Obviously the fear about seizures, so I guess it's having a safety plan so that someone is always there and someone can watch hydro. So just managing safety is important, but swimming and hydrotherapy is very therapeutic for a lot of people, and it can also be a way that people can exercise. You can move in water, say, better than you can move on land.
It has been quite popular with FND from what we've seen. Hydrotherapy has been quite popular.
Yeah. Any questions, anything, anyone comments? I'll be making the slides available, the video available. There'll be a handout that comes out. So that'll all be shared in our group. There's no other comments. I'll let people leave and get on with the day. Thank you, Jenny and Nabiha. That was really good. Is this something I can watch? Yes. So I am going to share the video, Naomi. So yes, you can watch it again when I share it.
Thank you all for your input and your time today. We genuinely really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a good learning experience for us.
Yeah, definitely. And we hope you take away one nugget of information today, because we gave you a lot.
Yeah. So, and also because it is a lot of information, so watching it later, looking at the handouts, etc., can help reinforce it.
Definitely. Thank you, everybody.
All right, I'm going to end it now. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.